Alright guys, so in this video we'll talk about the secretion and absorption of the cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, remember what we said? We said the fourth ventricle was responsible for secreting the cerebrospinal fluid once it is produced until it reaches the subarachnoid space. Okay, so let's see now how it is secreted. Okay, so the fourth ventricle consists of the central canal as well as the lateral and the medial apertures. Okay, those apertures, they are very important because they act as the outlet or the cerebrospinal fluid from the ventricles. So so from the lateral ventricle, so it should be noted to say the lateral ventricle produce about 80 to 90% of cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, so meaning the remaining percentage of cerebrospinal fluid it is produced by third and fourth ventricle. So from the lateral ventricle, the cerebrospinal fluid move into the third ventricle via interventricular foramen. So we just use a diagram so that it will be simple for you to explain even in an exam. In fact, it will be even simple for a marker to follow what you are trying to say. Okay, so from the lateral ventricle, remember the cerebrospinal fluid was entering or was exiting the lateral ventricle via interventricular foramen. Okay, so once it exits from the interventricular foramen here, it enters the third ventricle, and then from the third ventricle it was exiting the third ventricle via cerebral aqueduct, okay, into the fourth ventricle. So this is what we are basically doing here. So in the lateral ventricle, the cerebrospinal fluid moved to the third ventricle via interventricular foramen, from the third ventricle to the fourth ventricle via cerebral aqueduct. Okay, now the fourth ventricle acts as the outlet. Okay, so remember we said it consists of the two apertures. So we have the single midline as well as the lateral paired aperture. So let's start from here. We start from here. So here we have the central canal of the spinal cord. Remember we said the fourth ventricle, on its posterior inferiorly, it becomes continuous with the central canal of the spinal cord. So it is basically draining its cerebrospinal fluid into the central canal of the spinal cord. Not only the central canal of the spinal cord, it is also draining its content, which is the cerebrospinal fluid in this case, into the subarachnoid space of the spinal cord, subarachnoid space around the spinal cord, as well as the cordial equina. Okay, not only secreting or rather transforming the cerebrospinal fluid into the subarachnoid space, it is also transforming the cerebrospinal fluid into the medial, which is the single midline, as well as the paired lateral apertures. Okay, so the cerebrospinal fluid, which will be drained via single midline and lateral paired aperture, is the one which goes now until it reaches the cerebromedullary as well as the pontine cystines. Okay, so from the cerebromedullary and the pontine cystine, it then continues until it reaches the inferior surface of the cerebellum. Okay, So now from the inferior surface of the cerebellum, of course there will be some other structures where it's going to enter, but eventually it will end up into the arachnoid villi as well as the granulation. So these arachnoid villi and the granulation, they project into the superior sagittal sinus. Okay, so the superior sagittal sinus, basically these are the dura mater. Okay, dura sinus, sorry. So these are the dura sinus of the brain, and these they eventually drain their content into the jugular vein. Okay, so in short, from the arachnoid villi, once it goes to the superior